us know how fully, and this needs to be emphasized, and Harry will speak about this later, too few of us know how fully the LPC is an environmental research powerhouse, as well as a preserver of loons. It is fair to say
Yeah, we have a Loon call.
Should be all set. Thank you.
We all set?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you. My name is Bob Varney. I'm on Lake Winnipesaukee, by the way. I'm an islander. So it was great to come off the island and be here this evening. We had a very good year financially with the LPC. We ended the year in the black, which is always our goal, and I think we've almost always been able to achieve that. The assets have increased by $261,000 over the course of the past year. And we had a clean audit. Several of us met with the auditors, and they were quite complimentary of the way that we were handling the budget and expenses and income. Also applauded the work of the staff and the attention to detail that exists here, which is really terrific to see. This year was also, I think, a milestone year for us when you consider the good work of the investment committee that we have created and the development committee. And working in tandem, we dramatically increased income through investments. And they were not risky investments, but that attention to looking at funds and investing them properly. We carefully looked at what other organizations, similar organizations, were doing. We had an investment policy already in place. And this year, I believe, Bob, it was around, was it $177,000 or something like that?
177,000 and some cents.
So putting donations to good work and multiplying the benefits. Also, it's important to us to recognize, as you all understand, and with many volunteers here as well, that the work of our volunteers is an important part of our effort, and our budget would not be what it is without all this volunteer time and involvement that we have. It really makes a huge difference. You help us keep costs down. And that also shows, with that level of involvement, shows how much the public cares about what we do and helps make those connections as well, which then translates into more involvement with the organization and more donations and memberships. So please keep up the good work on that. It's really important. And of course, all of us as trustees are volunteers as well. And one other item of note is that, good evening. Great. Yeah. Here. It's only me anyway, so don't worry about it. The other thing that we've looked at carefully is some of the equipment that we have, and we've tried to make a more conscious effort of not having a situation where our boats and trailers are all old and falling apart. So we are developing a capital improvements program and trying to replace some of these older pieces of equipment so that over time we can keep up with it. But most of all, making sure that staff who are out there in the field are in the field safely and not at risk because some of that equipment hadn't been, it was so old and outdated that it would be an issue. So great work on that. And we have certainly more to do in the future, but that's another important part of all of this. And then finally, a copy of this annual report and the financial statements and IRS Form 990 is all on the LPC website. So if you have any need to look at that or would like to go over it, please do. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact Harry or any of us, and we'd be happy to explain or work with you on it.
I'm in favor of an expanded program, but I'm just wondering if you could talk about why the 25% increase for fiscal 22, 23, 24 in program expenses.
Yes, some of that is related to staff, trying to keep up with staff increases and trying to keep up in terms of what other organizations are paying staff in similar positions and making sure we're not at the bottom of that situation. And that's important both for keeping staff, but also paying them appropriately. And so that's been an important thing that we've talked about quite a bit and have been very careful and deliberate in how we've done that. Also, as I mentioned, some of the improvements in equipment and facilities over time is another big factor. Harry, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to highlight in terms of the expenses.
More interns to more lakes too in the last couple of years.
We have,
yeah.
we have Sandy, yeah, we've added a couple of more biologists to it, an outreach intern, which we never used to have in the past as well. Some of those have been funded by the B-120 oil spill mitigation funds as well.
Right.
Yeah. Bob, I think there was an increase in medical coverage as well, the cost, medical coverage costs. I think medical coverage costs.
Medical, yes, medical and like, yes, exactly right.
I believe the revenue has kept up. That's good.
It has, and as someone who's president of a company in the private sector, I can tell you that our expenses have gone up too with all of the costs with insurance and medical and personnel expenses and the like. So it's been a challenge, and I think we've been very careful in terms of looking carefully, asking lots of questions, and making sure that we're getting every bit we can out of the limited resources that we have. That's it. Any other questions?
Further questions? If not, thank you very much.
If you think of anything else, don't hesitate. Thank you.
Okay, great. And retiring trustee Tom Deans will present the development committee report.
Thanks, Bob. Well, as you heard in Bob's report, and you can see in the annual report, we had a very successful year at LPC financially. And thanks to all of you, the giving to the annual fund, the contributions from our members has continued to grow every year. We had a record year in that annual fund last year, and we're really ahead already this year for annual support. So thank you to all of you that contribute and make the work of LPC possible. The money that you provide LPC is the basis of an awful lot of the support for our research. Sandy was asking about the increase in the budget. A lot of those increases are covered by the generosity that you've offered to LPC, and we really appreciate that. We also have been a recipient of a couple of bequests last year, and already, at least one this year. And I just want to mention to everyone that as you're doing your estate planning, you always consider LPC as a possible donation or a beneficiary of your estate planning. And if you need help, Betsy and other people here on the staff can help you with working out the wording if you need help on that. And I really, on development, I can't thank enough the work that Betsy and Holly and Harry have done when it comes to making that all happen, because they've been a great team to work with. We've had a great, volunteer development committee, but the staff does so much of the legwork and really makes it all possible. But you are the backbone of that, and your support is so critical. So thank you very much.
Big thanks to all our committee chairs and for Tom Deans and his committee for bringing in the money, and Bob Varney gave the report before for spending it. It all goes well. Now, last item on the business agenda, Harry Vogel is going to present our nominee for the Spirit of the Loon Award.
All right. Thank you, Bob. Good. So it's my pleasure this evening to present the Loon Preservation Committee's Spirit of the Loon Award. And first, a few words about the award itself. So the Loon Preservation Committee's founder, Rawson Wood, created LPC in 1975, almost single-handedly through sheer force of will. So Rawson, as much as anybody and probably more than most, knew the power of individuals in creating a future for loons here in New Hampshire. And it was 17 years ago now that we at the Loon Preservation Committee were looking forward to celebrating Rawson's 100th birthday. And it was our dilemma was, what do you get a 100-year-old man who has everything? So we decided that we would take that occasion to honor Rawson in a way that we knew would be meaningful to him by creating an annual award to honor individuals who exemplify outstanding volunteer service to loons in the Loon Preservation Committee. So LPC has close to 1,000 volunteers. We appreciate all of them. But one person stood out for us this year because of her unique contributions to loon conservation over many years. And that person is Maria Colby. So Maria is a wildlife rehabilitator who we depend on to help us diagnose and treat the vast majority of our rescued loons in New Hampshire. She's always willing to accept a loon in need of help, no matter the time of day or night. In the winter, Maria handles almost all of LPC's ice rescued loons, and that has been up to 10 loons at a time. When we rescue those large groups of loons, she will stay with LPC staff at the veterinary office until midnight or later before taking those loons back to her center, the Wings Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. In recent years, we have received some oil spill mitigation funds to help offset some small portion of her costs in caring for those loons. But before that, she paid all of those costs, including buying the fish, the cost of medical tests, lead test kits, and much more, all on her own. Ingested lead fishing tackle continues to be a major cause of loon deaths here in New Hampshire. She has bought lead test kits for LPC to use. She has bought and placed lead tackle collection bins at many town transfer stations, and she has supplied LPC with lead collection bins to give to lake associations so that they can place them at lake access points throughout the state. Whenever she can be, Maria is there with us to release rescued loons back into the wild. She makes a point at those releases of engaging with members of the public to teach them about loons and LPC's work. And she even uses those occasions to recruit new members and volunteers for LPC. She takes every opportunity to introduce our staff to New Hampshire Fish and Game conservation officers, to veterinarians, and to other potential collaborators. She's always thinking about ways that she can use her many connections to help LPC staff in our work and further LPC's work for the loons. She demonstrates in many ways how much she cares for LPC staff and our work to help loons. So Maria has been a critical part of LPC's loon rescue program, and she's been an important partner in LPC's efforts to protect and recover loons in New Hampshire. LPC and all of us who value loons and wildlife owe her a huge debt of gratitude for her work, and I'm very pleased to name her our Spirit of the Loon Award recipient for this year. So Maria could not be here and join us this evening for among her many other tasks. I think that she's currently bringing up a brood of goldfinches, I believe, which she has to feed every 20 minutes. So she could not be with us. But we have a small loon decoy that's inscribed with her name to present to her when next we see her. And her name will forever be inscribed on this plaque right here on the Loon Center in the meeting room wall here. So we're very happy to have been able to do this for Maria. And that is the end of my presentation.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Right.
Harry?
Yes.
Recipients are here tonight.
Oh my goodness. We have a number of them.
Dana is one, Bill Gassman is another. Who else is here that are recipients of the Loon, Spirit of the Loon Award?
Bill raise his hand.
Bill sitting in the back
Okay.
there, and Dana. Yeah, I guess maybe you're the only two, but yeah. But many worthy souls up there. Yeah, good.
Excellent. Thank you, Harry.
Okay.
Don't go far because
Yeah.
Harry's
Yes.
will be on the agenda when just before we adjourn the meeting. Any questions about anything to do with not research or anything, because Harry's about to give a talk and you'll have questions afterwards, but any questions about the business of the LPC?
When is your fiscal year?
It's March. It ends March 31st. And all contributions are welcome now, even though it's not near the end of the fiscal year. Yes,
Can non-board members receive a copy of the annual report?
sure,
Of course.
sure.
Thank you.
Mark
wasn't one
needs
of
one.
them.
Yeah. Thank you, Harry. Okay. And you're welcome to join.
Active volunteer. No.
Yeah, okay. So members welcome, donors, leading donors welcome, and we're a wide and expanding family. And the more of you who are part of us, the better. Any other questions, thoughts? Delighted to welcome our new trustees. Sad to see two other trustees leave us, but we'll get them back. And anything else before we have a motion to adjourn the business meeting and turn it over to Harry's report? May I have a motion to adjourn?
We adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye, okay. Harry, you're on.
Great. Hey, Caroline,
Thanks, Bob.
Make sure that we're.
What do we do without you, Caroline?
There you go.
Let me just make sure that it is showing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Thank you, Caroline. Okay.
Can we shut that door, Karen?
Yes, we can. Yeah, absolutely. Great. All right. Great. Thank you, Tom. All right. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you all for being here. So this is kind of the second part of our annual meeting. It's also the final one of our Thursday Night Nature talk series. My name is Harry Vogel. I'm the Senior Biologist and Executive Director of the Loon Preservation Committee. I cannot promise that I will be scintillating in this talk, but I'm going to do my best to talk a little bit about LPC's work this summer to help loons cope with some of the challenges that they're facing, and also present some preliminary results to give you all a sense of what kind of a year it's been for loons so far in New Hampshire. So to start at the beginning, Loon Preservation Committee was created in 1975 because people had noticed that loons were becoming less common in New Hampshire. The thinking at that time was that if human activities had contributed to those declines, and it seemed pretty likely that they had, then human activities, if they were thoughtful and coordinated, could reverse those declines. So that's the hope and the philosophy on which the Loon Preservation Committee was formed. Our mission is to restore and maintain a healthy population of loons throughout the state, to monitor the health and the productivity of loons and loon populations as sentinels of environmental quality or indicators of the health of our lakes and ponds, and also to promote a greater understanding and a wider appreciation of loons and the larger natural world. So here we are at the Loon Center in Moultonborough. This is our headquarters and our visitor center, but LPC carries out programs of monitoring and research and management and education throughout the entire state. We're helped in those efforts by close to 1,000 volunteers throughout the state. And here are a number of those volunteers at a Raft and Sign Building Day this April. And we also have a small but dedicated staff. So every year we hire a number of seasonal field biologists to help us carry out our work across the state. This is the lineup for 2024, or at least most of them. And together, our members and volunteers and staff do several things. And the first thing that we do is we count loons, because counting loons gives us our first indication of problems with our loon population. It's also the ultimate measure of our success in trying to keep these birds common. So we have been monitoring loons since 1975, and over that span of years, we've actually created the longest running and the most comprehensive database of any loon population anywhere in the world right here in New Hampshire. This is our North Country biologist, Lauren O'Malley, setting out to look for loons this summer on Cherry Pond. So this year, LPC volunteers and staff monitored 324 lakes throughout the state. Not all of those lakes have loons on them, but all of them have the potential to have loons. We hope that more of them will have loons in the future. So we deal with that large number of loons and lakes by carving the state up into these different monitoring regions, and we assign one biologist to each of these monitoring regions. And it's one thing to say that our loon populations are increasing or they're decreasing, but we also want to know what are the factors that are contributing to those changes. And so we do research of various kinds. Banding loons is one of those research activities. So here's our Pemigewasset region biologist, Jaden Mowry, banding a loon on French Pond this summer. And we band loons because there's still a lot that we don't know about these birds, despite their popularity, despite all of the research that we have been doing over these many years. So even some basic aspects of loon life history, like how long do loons live? What is their age at first breeding? What is their reproductive output over their lifetime? Do they mate for life? Do the adult loons come back to the same lake year after year? Do the chicks come back to the lakes that they were born on or the same general area? Where do our loons go in the wintertime? And what are the migratory pathways that they use to go back and forth? All of those questions were, until pretty recently, not very well known at all. And even today, the answers that we have to those questions are based on limited data. So every loon that we ban gets a unique combination of bands. And every loon that we ban gets an aluminum Fish and Wildlife Service band that you can see here. Every one of those bands has a unique serial number on it. So it's an individual identifier all by itself for those loons. But if you're more than a foot or two away, you can't read those little numbers anymore. And that's why we put these plastic bands on these birds as well. So there's only going to be one loon anywhere in New Hampshire or anywhere in North America that has, say, a red stripe over a blue stripe on the left leg and a blue dot over a silver on the right leg. And when we see that loon again, we'll know that this is the Gould Pond female that we banded in the summer of 2024. So this year so far, we spent 21 nights banding. We banded 32 loons in total. As long as we have a loon in hand, we take a small sample of blood. We can test that blood for lead, for mercury, for other contaminants, for stress-indicating hormones. We can look at blood parasites. We can even look at liver and kidney function. We can even do genetics work on the blood of these loons. So we can learn an awful lot about the health of these birds just by taking that small sample of blood. This is Izzy Eisendrath, who is one of our Tufts veterinary interns, drawing a small sample of blood from a loon on Northwood Lake this summer. We also clip a couple of feathers. We can test those feathers for mercury. In the past, we've tested them for cyanobacteria toxins. We can do genetics work on the feathers as well. So here's Jaden clipping a wing feather of a loon on Bow Lake this summer. There's nothing quite like holding a little loon chick in your lap. This is Katie Baxter, our other Tufts vet intern, and Lauren on a night of banding at Big Dummer Pond. So these chicks are too small to band. We're not going to take any blood, not going to take any feathers from these little chicks.
But when we capture the adults, if there are any chicks with them, we pick up those chicks as well. And then we hold those chicks for safekeeping and really just so that we can release the adults and the chicks and not separate those chicks from the families as we release them back in the lake. The experience of adult loons is a little different than for those chicks. Here's a loon's eye view of banding. So we take care to minimize stress on loons while we're banding them, because after all, we're here to help those birds. And yes, we do take a little blood from them, but then they often take a little from us as well. So I consider that to be a fair exchange. This is Jaden after he got on the wrong end of a loon bill this summer. We also collect inviable eggs from failed nests. So this is Cassie Wolf, our Lakes Region East biologist, collecting a loon egg from a failed nest on Silver Lake in Madison this summer. This is one of 65 eggs we collected from failed nests in 2024. We will test some of those eggs for a wide range of contaminants. So here is our outreach biologist, Caroline Hughes, taking some measurements of an inviable egg before logging it into LPC's freezer. LPC's regular testing of failed loon eggs is the most comprehensive testing done on any loons and any loon eggs anywhere. And LPC also collaborated with New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services to test 144 failed eggs collected over the past 6 years for PFAS. These are the forever chemicals that are causing so much concern these days. And we found that those inviable loon eggs collected on many lakes in New Hampshire approach or exceed the LOEL of PFOS, a subset of PFAS for other birds. So I'll explain that. The LOEL is the lowest observed effects level. These are levels of contaminants found to impact the health, the breeding success, or the survival of other wildlife species. So we don't want to be anywhere close to those levels in our loons. And I would submit that those red and black dots and even those yellow dots are a warning sign for our loons and for our other wildlife as well. We also work to rescue loons in distress. And those rescues began early this year as we found several loons trapped in small pools of open water as the ice closed in on them. If ice in happens too late on our lakes, it coincides with the loon's winter wing feather molt when they can't fly to escape that ice. And that means certain death for those loons if we can't rescue them. So here are Caroline and our field program coordinator, Ashley Keenan, and our senior biologist, John Cooley, tending to a loon rescued from Lake Winnisquam in January. And we were able to band and release that loon back to the ocean. Here's Caroline with a loon rescued from Poggers Bay. This loon was also banded and released as well in the ocean, and it was actually sighted back in New Hampshire this summer. In February, we found close to 30 loons trapped in the last small pool of open water in the Broads on Winnipesaukee. We had just started rescue operations when a warm south wind opened up the Broads once again, and those loons dispersed throughout the lake. So this winter was the first in which a substantial number of loons overwintered on freshwater lakes in New Hampshire without migrating to the ocean. And that is evidence of big changes in our world. This year, LPC took a huge leap forward in its ability to diagnose rescued loons to help treat and release them. This is Caroline, John, and Ashley learning how to use LPC's new portable X-ray machine. And here are Ashley and Caroline preparing to X-ray an injured loon at Gould Pond. That loon needed surgery to remove a lure with a treble hook that had caught both of its feet. Afterwards, it was banded and released, and that was the female loon whose bands you saw earlier. Our goal is always to rescue these or to release these rescued birds back to the wild as quickly as we can. This is Jaden and Izzy releasing a loon rescued on Suncook River after the water level was dropped to repair a boat launch. Sadly, we can't always release rescued loons. This is a loon that John picked up on Merry Meeting Lake in April. And here's an X-ray showing the 2 pieces of lead tackle it ingested. So this loon had lethal levels of lead in its blood. There was nothing that we could do to save it, and we had to have it euthanized. And here's Jaden with another loon from Merry Meeting Lake at Maria Colby's Wildlife Rehabilitation Center this summer. That loon too had ingested lead tackle, and it also had to be euthanized. And then we had a third loon from Merrymeeting Lake with the same result a few days ago. So somebody or some people on Merrymeeting Lake are illegally fishing using lead tackle, and they need to cut it out. These unfortunate loons that we find dead or have to euthanize have historically gone to Mark Pokris, a veterinarian at the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts University. One of the best ways of figuring out what is affecting loons at a population level is to find out what is killing individual birds. So we started to send birds to Mark in the 1980s. And this, for example, is how we first found out about the problem of lead tackle in our loons. And Mark retired a number of years ago, but not really. He's continued to help us. And one of the many ways Mark continues to help us is by sending great veterinary students our way. So here are a former veterinary intern, Tony Rabasco, and one of this year's interns, Katie Baxter, in the Loon Center lab downstairs, doing a necropsy on a loon recovered this summer. Necropsy is just an animal autopsy. So far this year, we have picked up 7 lead-poisoned loons, which is far too many lead-poisoned loons. But it's better than the 11 or 12 that we had picked up in some previous years. And so overall, our lead deaths are declining. And I take that as evidence that our lead tackle buyback program is working. This is the 7th year of that program to give $10 vouchers to people who hand in old lead tackle at participating tackle shops so that they can buy loon-safe, non-toxic tackle. And at each of those shops, the person turning in the largest amount of lead tackle this year is going to get a check for $100 from the Loon Preservation Committee. The person handing in the second largest amount is going to get a check for $50. So we're serious about getting this lead out of our loons. And please do visit loonsafe.org for details of that program and a list of retailers that are participating in that program. So far, we've collected over 57,000 pieces of lead tackle through this program. And that is tackle that is never going to find its way into our lakes or our loons. Here's Caroline educating about loons and lead at Discover Wild New Hampshire Day in Concord this April. And we also work in other ways to minimize human impacts on loons. And so we float these loon nesting rafts to help loons that have been displaced from their traditional nesting sites because of shoreline development. And these rafts float. They go up and down as water levels go up and down, so they can protect loons from those changes in water levels as well. This is John getting ready to float a raft on Lower Kimball Lake this spring. This year, LPC and staff and volunteers floated 153 of those nesting rafts on lakes throughout the state, which is a new record. So these are LPC volunteers Dundee Nestler and Sharon Grader floating a raft on Perkins Pond this spring. That hard and cold work paid off. More than 1 out of every 4 chicks hatched in the state this year came from a raft floated by a Loon Preservation Committee volunteer or staff member. This is another one of our intrepid volunteers floating a raft on Mendham's Pond this spring. Some of these rafts have game cameras on them to help us document the causes of nest failures if, sadly, they fail. Here's an example of that on Lee's Pond this year. Almost all of them have covers to help nesting loons stay cool on the nest, and you'll see why that is important later. We also float signs and rope lines around nesting loons to give them a little bit of the space that they need to be able to incubate those eggs and hatch those chicks successfully. This is Cassie and LPC volunteer Sue Jackman putting out signs on Baltz Lake. Protected 140 nesting pairs of loons with signs this year. That's not a record. It's got to be very close. And this is, I like this action shot of Cassie floating a sign on Ospey Lake this summer. And pairs protected by those signs hatch more than 1 out of every 2 chicks hatched in the state. So this is our Seacoast region biologist, Michael Clasby, floating a sign on Big Island Pond this summer. And once chicks are hatched, we sometimes float these caution loon chick signs to slow down boat traffic in brooding areas. This is Cassie getting ready to float some of those signs in Silver Lake in Madison. We also work with dam owners to try and maintain stable water levels during critical nesting periods. So altogether, more than 60% of the loon chicks hatched in the state benefited from LPC's management efforts. And we're confident that every loon benefited from our educational efforts. Those included our educational signs posted at access points of lakes. And we float these signs because once a loon has swallowed a lead sinker or lead-headed jig, or been tangled up in monofilament line, or been hit by a boat or a jet ski, there's often not a lot that we can do to save that loon. And so with that in mind, we put a lot of our effort into teaching people about loons and their needs to try and keep those things from happening in the first place. And it's really in those areas where we have been able to encourage a culture of respect and appreciation. Those are the places in New Hampshire that loons have thrived. We gave in-person talks about loons and their challenges and our work to help them at lake associations and other venues. This is our outreach intern, Linda Moore, at the Berlin Public Library this summer. And we gave talks right here at the Loon Center as well. So here's Caroline giving one of 111 presentations and exhibits so far this year. We continued our partnership with the Squam Lakes Natural Science Center to have our Squam Lakes biologist, Tiffany Grotti, give educational loon cruises on Squam. Tiffany and LPC were able to continue our work to understand and reverse the declines of loons in Squam Lake, thanks to generous support of donors to our Squam Lake Loon Initiative. Caroline has continued to expand the Loon Preservation Committee website. We have a lot of information there on loon natural history, including a whole section on the calls of loons, amongst other loon behaviors. And we have a lot of information there as well about our work and support of loons. So please do check us out at loon.org. Caroline continues to publish the LPC e-newsletter. That now goes out to close to 7,000 people. Our Instagram account has over 1,500 followers. Our YouTube channel has over 8,000 subscribers. And our Facebook page has over 18,000 followers. LPC super volunteer Bill Gaspin, sitting in the back there, worked incredibly hard to set up and run 2 LPC loon cams and broadcast 2 nesting pairs of loons to the world. The loon cams had over 187,000 views and over 41,000 chat messages from people all over the world. That included at least 1 view from our Loon Center manager, Kirsten Powell. So we have been working hard to get the word out in different ways this year. We also have a number of events to celebrate loons and our fascination with them. So the 3rd Saturday of July is an important day for loons in New Hampshire. It starts with our loon census, which is our annual effort to get as many people as we can out on the lakes counting loons from 8 to 9 a.m. to give us a snapshot in time of that loon population. This is a former LPC biologist, Jaden Jack, looking for loons on Census Day on Winnipesaukee this year. We had 454 people, and as always, at least 1 Labrador Retriever take part in that fine tradition. Altogether, we counted 525 loon adults and chicks, and those figures are rolled up into our season-long monitoring that I'll be reporting. And then starting at 10 o'clock that same day, we had our Loon Festival. So our good friends at Meredith Rotary were there with free hot dogs and ice cream for everyone. Linda Moore gave loon talks in the garage of our Kitty and John Wilson Field Operations Center. You could dunk a loon biologist if you answered a loon question correctly, or even if you couldn't, but contributed a dollar to the cause. And you could get your face painted, and there were balloon animals and kids' crafts and many other activities as well. So it's been a busy and challenging year. And like all nonprofits, we rely on our volunteers to help us in our work. So this is a good time for me to thank all of our volunteers and supporters for your help this year, because we could not do this work without you. And soon enough, it was time to pull our rafts and signs off the water again to be ready for another spring and another loon breeding season. This is former LPC treasurer Glenn Green and volunteer Bill Griffin hauling in signs a couple of weeks ago on Crystal Lake in Enfield. And then it was time to take all that data that we collected over the course of the summer and enter it into our database. So that is not exciting work. Look at poor Cassie here. She'd rather be on a lake somewhere than entering data. It's not exciting work, but it is important. And this year we entered a 50th year of data on loons and our work to preserve them into that database. And that added again to what was already the longest running and the most comprehensive database on any loon population anywhere. And here are the results of that work. So the good news is that in 2024, we had more than 4 times the number of paired loons as we did when we began this work back in 1975. When I talk about paired loons, that's that red line. This is a loon that pairs up with another loon that will defend a lake or an area of a lake from intruding loons and have at least the potential to breed and to contribute to that next generation. So again, these numbers are all preliminary, and we're going to go through an extensive process of error checking and analysis over the next few weeks and months. But it looks like we gained a few pairs since last year, and we actually topped 350 loon pairs this year for the first time since we began that work. Now, only a proportion of those loons breed. Those are nesting adults. That is the black line, and that was actually slightly down from last year. Chicks hatched and chicks surviving were both slightly up from last year. So as nice as it is to see that rise in, especially in that top red line, we're still a long way from what we feel are historical levels of loons in New Hampshire and the number of loons that we feel should be in our state. So that distance between the top of that red line and those 2 green lines, that's a lot of empty lakes that don't have loons that we feel should have loons. And we want to keep working to make sure that we fill in the rest of those lakes as well. If we go a layer deeper into that data, we get these relative reproductive success parameters. So the blue line on this graph is a proportion of territorial pairs that nested. So this year, 2/3 of our territorial pairs nested. And by that, we simply mean they built a nest and they laid at least 1 egg in that nest. So that's a drop from last year, and it's on the low end of the past 10 years. The red line is hatching success. So about 0.9 chicks were hatched this year per nesting pair of loons. That is up from last year, but not where we need it to be. And the green line is chick survival. So if a chick was hatched this year, it had about a 70% chance of surviving until this point in the season. And so that number is up from last year, but there's a little bit of a hint there of a downward trend over the past 20 years. If we put all of those things together, all of those trends, we get this number, the chicks surviving per territorial pair. So the red line on this graph is 0.48 chicks surviving per territorial pair. And that's the number that we know from research done by Loon Preservation Committee and other organizations. We know we need to hit that number on average to maintain our loon population. And of course, we want to do more than just maintain a viable population here in New Hampshire. We want to continue growing and continue recovering that loon population. So in 2024, we were above our poor result last year, but we were still below that line. And this is an important graph because the periods of really strong growth in our New Hampshire loon population, we can relate those back to years where we spent a good number of years well above that line. So the early 2000s, is a good example of that. And since then, as you can see, it's been harder to stay above that line. So our concern as we look at this graph is that as we continue to lose adult loons from lead tackle or from monofilament or from collisions with boat and jet skis or just from natural causes, where are the chicks going to be coming from to replace those adults? So we've been at or above that line for the past 5 out of the past 10 years. But as you can see, it's getting harder to stay above that line, even with the intensive management and the outreach that we're doing. This year, 58% of our loon nests were successful, and that's a higher percentage than last year. More than half of those successful nests, though, resulted in only 1 chick, right? And that's success light, but it's still success, and we'll take it. Of the nests that failed, far more than half of them, as you can see, failed for unknown reasons. And that's because if a wave crashes over a nest and washes a loon egg out of it, or if an eagle comes down and snatches that egg, that happens in the blink of an eye. And unless we had a camera trained on that nest or human eyes on that nest, many times we simply won't know why that nest failed. But as of the known causes of nest failure, we humans play a role in most of them. So human disturbance, well, that's obvious. That's just people getting too close to loons on the nest and flushing those loons off the nest and causing it to fail. And flooded nests, are down from the record that we set last year. And so, I mean, that could simply be, we had less rain last year than we had in this year, and that was a benefit to our loon population. Predation, though, was up from that. And there's several possible explanations for that. It could be that with fewer nests flooded, they were more available for things to predate. But many of those predations may have a human component as well, because populations of egg predators like raccoons and gulls, they have benefited from their association with people. They have feasted on human trash, right? And their populations have risen to unnaturally high levels. And now they put pressure on our loons and other native wildlife species. And some of those predations may well have happened only after humans flushed those loons off the nest. So the benefit of having 50 years of data is that we can look back and see how loons fared in wet years and in dry years, or in hot years or cool years, or years with flood events or heat waves. And every one of the 50 dots on this graph represents a year's worth of nesting success for New Hampshire loons. And so we know that a lot of rain and rain events increase nest failures. So our record wet summer last year made it a very tough year for our loons. This year, we had less rain, but more heat. And loons are a northern species. They're close to the limit of their southern breeding range here in New Hampshire. And that means that loons on the nest suffer in hot weather. So they need to leave that nest more often to cool down. And that leaves those eggs exposed to heat or to any predators that are working their way along the shoreline or flying overhead and looking for an easy meal. And we can see a clear trend in LPC's data. So summers with hotter June, July temperatures mean fewer loon chicks hatched per nesting pair of loons. And guess which dot was 2024? The one all the way by itself at the far right of that graph. So New Hampshire, and in fact the world, had a record hot June and July this year. And that's disturbing for a whole bunch of reasons, but one of them is that New Hampshire summers are predicted to remain hot and in fact get hotter in the future. And our winters are predicted to get warmer too. And so ice in of our lakes will likely continue to be later and put more loons in danger as it coincides with that winter wing feather molt. And there will still be cool summers in New Hampshire. But those cool, dry summers that are conducive to loon breeding will likely be fewer and farther between in the future. So LPC's challenge has always been, and it will continue to be, to help loons cope with their challenges, including these climate stressors in bad years, and then to help them make the best of better years that are to come. So to wrap up, for our volunteers and staff, it was a summer of good work to benefit our loons. We had some adventures. The back roads took their toll on boats and trailers and on cars as well. This turned into an expensive survey for our Monadnock region biologist, Mike DeJoy. We had our share of the usual trials and setbacks to overcome. Ashley told me she's never changed as many tires in her life as she did this summer. And then when that became old hat, the universe decided to challenge her with a broken trailer axle. And sometimes we just had to improvise to get the job done. But we saw a lot of loons. We saw some other wildlife. Some of those encounters were more welcome than others. And some animals we like to see in the wild, but not so much in our nets when we were trying to rescue loons. Sometimes we worked under beautiful blue skies, and sometimes not. Here's Caroline got put through the ringer this summer. Here's Caroline in the dregs of Hurricane Beryl on the first Connecticut lake. But our great staff remained cheerful through it all. And there were some long days, right, as we carried out our monitoring and research and management and outreach throughout the state. And those were often followed by some long nights of banding We had a great field crew. They remained happy and upbeat through what was a challenging summer for the loons as well as for them. We all worked hard, and it was good and necessary work for our loons. And of course, there's still much work to be done, right? And the impacts of LPC's work go far beyond loons and far beyond New Hampshire. Loons are a sentinel of environmental quality. They're an indicator of the health of our aquatic ecosystems. So they're scientifically important and they have a wide public appeal. And that is why they have found themselves to be a focal point of so many of our environmental issues. And that means that if we can save loons, then we can save a lot of other species that depend on the same clean water and quiet places. And I like to think that at the same time as we've been working to recover our loon population, we've also been working to encourage an environmental ethic. And ultimately, that's going to benefit not just loons, but also other wildlife and even the people and the economy of New Hampshire. Because after all, that's a large part of the reason why we choose to visit or to live here. And our hope is that the end result of all of our efforts will be a bright future for loons in New Hampshire. And I prefer to think of this as a sunrise photo. So that is the end of my presentation. I would love to answer any questions, though, that folks have about loons or LPC's work in support of it. Dana.
There were, I believe, substantial number of loon nests that were over
Over-incubated.
incubated.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
wondered how many there were and was that really significant this year? And most likely, I assume
Yeah.
it was due to the temperatures.
Yes, I mean, speculation, yes, there were a good number of eggs that just failed to hatch. And we had no other, no reason, no outstanding reason to be able to say why they failed to hatch. So in that case, we simply say that these eggs are over incubated. John and Caroline, I don't know exactly how many of those eggs we had. Many of those are collected. So those made up part of the 65 eggs, that we collected that are now in our freezers. And there has been some speculation that, yes, the increasing summer temperatures, as you've seen, there are fewer chicks hatched per nesting pair when those temperatures, are when we have those hot June and July temperatures. And that probably did play a factor in reducing our nesting success of
I
loons.
mean, there were some days, the end of June, that were just oppressive for
Yeah.
human beings, leave alone a room
Absolutely.
out in the open without any protection.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Loons, again, these are northern species, so their entire physiology is built around conserving heat, not dissipating it, and they can suffer if they're out of the water. Yeah. Yeah.
Harry, can you
Yes.
explain how you capture the loons to answer?
Sure. Yeah. So Tom, it's an interesting thing. So we'll go out, of course, at nighttime, and we have 1 million or 1.5 million candle power spotlight. And after scanning around on the lake to find those loons, it's not that we're chasing loons around, the lake in the night. We'll very slowly motor towards those loons. Often we'll be playing, loon calls. And that loon will turn, and to the loon's mind, probably there's an intruder somewhere behind that bright light, which is shining right in their eyes so that they can't see us. There's an intruding loon on their lake, and they need to challenge that because they're territorial birds. And so they will very slowly come towards us. And as we close in, we have a big salmon landing net. So we'll splash that over the top of them or in front of them. And a loon's reaction to danger is always to dive. It's never to take flight. So we can end up getting that loon in the net. And then we have a pretty upset loon in that net that we're bringing in. And so we gather the bill, which is its main weapon. And so that's what they can use to hurt us. We gather the wings so that they don't damage or injure the wings. We immediately put a towel over their eyes to try and calm them down as much as possible. And then very efficiently, we put the bands on, we take that blood sample, we take some measurements, we take a feather sample, and then turn it around and get it right back in the water. Yes.
So how long does that all take when you get it into the boat?
Yeah. I think our goal for all of that is probably about 30 minutes or so. If we can pull that off, 30 minutes is typically a good turnaround time. The entire time we're monitoring the breathing, and the temperature of these loons. And if they begin to overheat then we have ice packs that we can put on their feet to kind of cool them down and keep them comfortable. If that doesn't work, then we'll let that loon go, because again, we're here to help these birds and not, put them through any undue stress. What we're doing when we band is we balance the small chance of harm to an individual. And happily, there's never been a loon that's received any kind of a serious injury as we're banding, against the benefit to the species, for that. Because it's only through banding them that we can get this information that we really feel is necessary if we're going to be able to manage and assure these birds of a good future in the future.
What percent of the total population is banded, do you think?
So that's a good question. I'm fewer than half of our loons, certainly, probably around a third, I'm going to say, maybe. John?
That's fair, especially in the.
Yeah.
He or she is gonna go into that lake.
Yes, it happens
And
on
they
occasion.
and the loons are gonna be happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
The ice rescue, when you,
Yeah.
how do you do that and stay safe? You guys act probably not big enough to stand on it.
Yes, it can be a dicey business, to go across. We do not recommend that people who are not trained in ice rescues, do that. For a long time, so John is a great frugal Yankee. And for a long time, John was just, running out and grabbing these loons and then kind of trying to run back. And I kept on saying, John, you need to have a survival suit on. And he'd say, no, I'm fine. I've got my long underwear on. If I go through, I'll just pull myself out again and do it. But we finally got John into a dry suit. And so that's a necessary, piece of safety equipment if we're going after these loons. And really, we have to leave these loons in the ice as the ice closes in on them until we've got an open area of water. It's probably not much larger than this room. And that's the point at which we can really go in and have a decent chance of actually being able to net them and rescue them. So it's a very dicey thing because the eagles are circling, by that point as well. If we leave it too long and the ice closes in and these loons find themselves on top of the ice without any open water, the eagles will make quick work of them. So we wait until we feel like the ice is safe enough to hold our weight. And then we'll make a run across that ice and try and get to them. Yeah. Yes.
I was wondering if you could extrapolate on your concerns of the overwintering population, and if you foresee that trend continuing. And another side note, real quick, I'm a naturalist in Northern Virginia. We actually had to go out and rescue one in a small little artificial neighborhood pond. They're about a quarter-mile long.
Yeah.
Just a little too short for takeoff.
Yep.
It didn't feel comfortable taking off over the highway. And it took us 2 nights to catch that thing. We brought in a biologist from Ohio. It's operating in Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
And it actually, the story made the post, because that was a unique situation for us in the PC area.
Yeah.
A migrating bird that just stuck for about.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is not easy work. And especially, if you have, up to 10 of them, or in this case, up to the 30 of these loons that we saw. So that would have been very taxing. We were actually very lucky that the lake opened up, once again and did that. And in terms of future trends, as I said, I think that ice-ins of our lakes are going to continue to be later, and they're going to continue to coincide with that time of flightlessness for our loons. And it's going to maintain, I think, it's going to continue to be a dangerous, and a taxing part of our winter schedule here to go after these loons that are in danger of being iced in. But it's so important to be able to save these loons as well, because loons are characterized by a delayed age of first reproduction. Probably 6 to 7 years is our best, sense right now before they begin to reproduce. Then they have a limited reproductive capacity in any 1 year because they can have only 1 or 2 chicks. And any animal with those life history characteristics, the key to maintaining a viable population is to keep those adult birds alive so that they have many opportunities over their lifetime to reproduce. And that's why they can deal with a bad year or a couple of bad years, as long as they live to try again next year. And that's why lead sinkers, and iced-in loons and things are so dangerous to our loon population. That's why we put so much of our effort into trying to mitigate those things.
Overwintering mean they stayed the whole winter? Or
They
just too
did,
long?
yeah, substantial number.
Roughly 30 stayed on with.
Yep, that is our best sense of it. Yeah, yeah, that was a first.
If the weather allows them, do you sense any danger to them of being on fresh water, not getting to salt water or anything like that?
No, there are loons further south that have, begun to routinely overwinter on some freshwater lakes as well. And so we know that it's possible for loons to do that, but it's also a very dangerous proposition to try and wait, because again, if that icing happens eventually, that they are going to die unless we can rescue them.
Yeah, but can you tell them how long the young spend out on the ocean and don't come back?
Yeah. So a lot of our loons, the loons that are born this year will likely spend the next couple of years on the ocean before first flying back in as breeding adults. And so it's about 26 months of age that a loon first molts into its black and white plumage, which we actually call the alternate or the breeding plumage of these birds. And even then, it's usually another few years before they're successful in gaining a territory of their own and actually beginning to breed. So it's a long run for these birds before they even have a chance to have a territory of their own. Yes.
Harry, how many of the summer interns live in the building next door? And those that don't, where do they live in the summer?
Yeah, so we do. So our North Country biologists and our Monadnock and Seacoast biologists, they're simply too spread out over different areas of the field. They're too distant from us to be able to house here at our field operations center. But last year we had 8 field biologists, so it was pretty much full up, there. We have a couple of Tufts interns as well. We can house an outreach intern there in some years as well. So this year, I think we had six people living there. But it's great. It's wonderful to be able to have that housing, because the housing that we had earlier was very rudimentary. And as everybody knows, in the summertime in the Lakes region, it's awfully hard to find affordable housing for students. And so that has been a huge help in able to attract good people and to be able to keep them in comfort. We ask a lot of these biologists. We work them all day, and then half the time we work them all night, as well. So I tell them they can sleep when they're back in class in the fall. So the least that we can do is offer them some decent housing while they're here. Yes.
As you attempt to catch them in an iced-in situation, will they dive to?
They will. Yes, they will. They will actually dive to escape, and so you need to be very vigilant. And it's an art, to be able to catch these birds. You've got to wait for them to come back up and then scoop them up as you can. Now we're also using some modified gill nets and things of that nature to be able to catch them. So these techniques are all still pretty new, and they're still evolving, and we're trying different things to figure out what's going to be successful. And so it's a new area of operations for us. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Harry.
Great. Oh, one more question. Okay.
Do you have any comments on how the pair of loons that nested right on the road at 20 Mile Bay on Saki, and they had 2 chicks, and did they survive? And
they did. So they had 2 chicks. Now, one of those chicks promptly beat it out of that family and joined another family of loons, we think, after the parents did such an amazing job of sitting on those eggs as the traffic, whizzed by them in 20 Mile Bay. And what has been the fate? Do we know of those 2 chicks? No? They did.
Unfortunately, we lost our grafted on chick. The 2 chicks that were originally hatched, that family that it grafted itself onto, are fine. But that 3rd chick that moved to 20 Mile Bay was, we think, by vote.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Okay. Yep. This is what can happen. Well, all right. Thank you all for being here. Good.
You did a great job, Harry.